Hello, I'm Katie Harrison and this is Stepmum Space, the judgment-free zone where we'll talk candidly about the fairy tales and scary tales of stepmum life. So whether you've been a stepmum for years, you're just starting out, or you want to understand the stepmum in your life a little bit better, this is the place for you. Nowadays, most stepfamilies are formed out of separation rather than death. But of course, this isn't always the case, and my guest today, Beth, not her real name, has been in a relationship with a widowed dad of 2 for a year now. Beth got in touch with me to share her story. So Beth, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
How are you?
Yes, really well, thank you. Really well. The 2022 is going really well so far.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. So tell us a little bit about when you met your partner.
Yes, so we met just over a year ago on the build up to Christmas 2020. And we actually met on an online dating app. He instigated it, I'd like to say. And and then we just sort of started chatting, really.
And how did it kind of pan out? When did you find out he was a dad, and when did you find out the sort of background of his story?
Yeah, it was pretty much straight away. So his profile, he was really transparent. He mentioned that he listed himself as a widower. He mentioned that he had 2 children. So I knew from the start that that was kind of his story. And actually, something that I remembered he put on his profile that was quite refreshing was, I think, something around name your 3 biggest achievements or proudest achievements. And he actually listed his late wife, which I thought was very sweet and very refreshing to kind of have that honest profile, which is quite rare. So so I knew from the start.
I think a lot of women would find that really difficult to start a relationship with a man who sort of had that in their past. Was that a concern for you at all?
It was different. It wasn't a concern at that stage. I think we were very much in lockdown, and I was very much open to. I've been single for a while and open to exploring dating again and all of that. And I just wanted to keep a real open mind and not have to be too prescriptive about who I was looking for. And obviously, when his profile came up, I was kind of like, okay, none of this really ticks the typical boxes.
It never
Um,
does.
no, it doesn't. And this one really didn't in terms of location. I'd never dated anyone with children before. Obviously, never dated anyone who was a widower before. But it was just, I think, the honesty and all the other stuff that was on his profile that was really interesting.
So when did you meet the kids?
That was actually a long time. So it was a good 9 months before we met. And I think, a lot of that was around being in the pandemic. And we didn't actually meet face to face until this time last year, actually. So we started off by doing some FaceTime cocktail nights, FaceTime making dinners together, and really getting to know each other, like really, really getting to know each other, which you typically wouldn't do if you just met in a bar, I guess. So yeah, we left it a long time.
And it must have been unusual going from sort of never having dated somebody with kids to suddenly dating somebody who's got their kids full time.
Yeah, and that was it. He did have them full time. So it was, very much he'd have so much to sort of talk about, and I'd be like, oh yeah, we're in a lockdown and I've been online and done some work, and whereas he'd been doing stuff with them. So it was quite strange and new, but for some reason didn't ever feel alien, or it just kind of felt very natural from the start, really.
That's good. And when you met the children, how was that?
Yeah, so we did it purposely. We met actually. I'd booked a cottage by the sea for my birthday weekend, and I'd had various friends come in and out that weekend. And I'd sort of said to my partner, perhaps it would be a good time if to meet the boys. And we talked about it. And I said what I could do is invite loads of friends with their kids, and it's just like meeting daddy's friend,
Mm.
and lots of other children being there. But I have to say, I was incredibly nervous.
And how old
Yeah.
were they at this point, the kids?
So the youngest was 4, and the oldest was just turned 9, actually, just turned 9. So yeah, there's quite a gap between them. But what was lovely was that a couple of my friends had children who were the same age. So I'd kind of surrounded myself, and purposely so actually, nearer the time to kind of get to know really what that age meant and what their interests were and what it was like to be around children that age, not having children myself.
So you're in this cottage, you've got these kids, and you're kind of, deep down that you're probably more than just dad's friend. but obviously, and probably all the other grown-ups there knew that as well. So how was it with the children?
It was lovely. I was absolutely terrified. I felt physically sick before they arrived, and luckily a couple of my friends arrived before, and they were kind of like, "You'll be fine. You can do this. They'll love you." Blah blah blah. And it was just okay. And I still remember it really clearly, like coming around the car park, and they just paid for the parking meter, and then there they were, these two children that I'd seen pictures of and
Mm.
videos of, and actually they'd even kind of interrupted some of our Zoom calls type thing some nights. But yeah, it was very strange.
So you mentioned they were 4 and 9 when you met them. At
Yeah.
what age were they when their mum passed away?
They were 3 and just turned 8.
Okay. So not that long really for them to sort of be meeting somebody else. How did they react to you?
Well, I guess because I was just Daddy's friend. Daddy has lots of friends, not necessarily female friends, hopefully. But I think he's a very sociable man, and I think as time's gone on, because he was keen to take full responsibility of the children and not introduce sort of a nanny or a full-time childminder.
Yeah.
I guess there were times when new people were being introduced. There were babysitters, so I don't think it was abnormal for them at that stage for Daddy to have a friend to introduce them to. And I think he had subtly mentioned my name in certain conversations prior to that. So it
Mm.
was a kind of warming them up to this person. But yeah, it was very much just Daddy's friend. So I don't think they didn't come across that they'd put too much thought in it, or it was a big deal for them at that stage.
They must have at some stage worked out that you were more than just a friend. So talk us through that.
Yeah, that's been an interesting one because we really just wanted to see how it all panned out rather than going in with a time frame or a strategy. So first of all, it was just to establish, like, are there any issues here? Like, is this going to cause any emotional problems? And then we just kind of thought, "Do you know what? Let's just leave this until perhaps they raise it." So we did. We left it for some time, and actually, just to say, after that weekend, I ended up being with them every weekend, and we'd made quite a conscious decision to do that to keep things moving and keep them warm and keep them familiar. So the initial conversation was, Daddy really likes Beth and wants to spend some more time with her. Is that okay with both of you? And it was like, yeah, yeah, sure, Daddy, type thing. So then we just saw more of each other, the four of us, and then just waited for the question. And actually, we expected it more from the eldest, but it just didn't really ever come.
That's amazing. And as you were telling the story, I was thinking, God, how lucky that he when the child was asked the question, "Is that okay?" The child said yes, um,
Yeah.
because so many times we hear that children have an influence in a way that isn't helpful to the relationship. So how brilliant that he was in that place, and it says a lot about obviously the situation around him. Going from sort of being a single woman to being in a relationship and almost having a sort of ready formed family must have been a massive transition for you, and particularly in most situations there is an ex-wife or an ex-partner. Obviously
Mm.
in yours there wasn't. So how does that feel for you? I think there'll be a lot of people listening thinking, God, I don't know if I could do that. Like, I'd be comparing myself, or I'd be wondering about you know how the boys were feeling about it being me there and not their mum. Like, can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that there's a lot in that for sure. And I think, first of all, I'd never felt I compared myself to his late wife. I think because he was very open and transparent and would speak to me about her from day one, really. And so I felt like I got to know a lot about her, and we aren't that similar, certainly from a visual perspective, background, interests, profession. We're very separate, different people.
Mm,
So I guess that kind of helped in a way that I guess if you were similar, you'd be thinking in the back of your mind, oh, am I just replacing? Am I just filling this gap? I never got that sense from him at all. He came across very like grounded, very matter of fact. I'd spent some time to process this and the loss. And I think I didn't ever had that insecurity that I was replacing someone that was missing. I think it was
mm,
just circumstantial that we just had chemistry. I think where it's come more into play for me is the element of always being very present for us. So whether
okay.
that be, pictures around the house, which you would expect and I would want to see because we need to keep the memory of her alive for the boys, absolutely. But there's certain things like they've got 4 candles on the fireplace with the initials. And you just
Yeah.
kind of think, oh, over time you think, where am I ever going to fit into this, group? And how does that work? And then, there's certain conversations where the boys will just bring up mummy. But the lovely thing about it is they never seem to feel awkward about it. And I never get awkward about it. I'm very conscious to kind of be very attentive when they do,
Yeah.
and make sure that they know it's a safe space for them to talk about it. But it does sort of catch your breath every now and then. You think, oh yes, sorry, there is that woman that actually carried you and raised you and brought you into this world, who was my partner's wife, who we loved dearly, and they met at university, so they were together a very long time. So
Mm.
you can't compare yourself with that. You just be losing the battle.
I think a lot of women would also probably wonder about whether is it sometimes easier to form a new relationship with somebody when you don't have an ex in the background?
Yeah, I think there is an element of that. I think I've got the only people I've had where I can really talk to about some of this stuff, other, and obviously listen to your podcast, is when they've got stepchildren or they've remarried, but there's the ex in the background. And I hear some of the stories that they have to deal with, where either it be the male or the female partner have been quite difficult, manipulative, whatever, use the kids as bait, as it were. I don't have any of that. And obviously, I would always, my preference would always have been for the boys to have their mother. There's part of me that thinks, could I have done this if she was around? I don't know. I wonder if that's where insecurities, comparisons, all that comes really into play when that person is present.
That's really, really interesting. I've never thought about it like that. And I suppose what I've often found is that when somebody's passed away, people only ever talk about the positives about that person. Whereas when people have split up, there's normally a really good reason. So you can kind of understand that actually they split up for a reason.
Mm.
So it's really interesting to hear your take on it.
Yeah, and I do only hear the positives, whether that be, I've met a lot of friends now, a lot of mutual friends, and, we're building our own friendships now. And I've obviously met his family who have got pictures as well all around the house, which, I was warned about, which is
Yeah.
lovely because, she was a very big part of their life. And you can't take that away from them. And I wouldn't want to, absolutely. And I guess where it gets a bit different is when you think, okay, well then how do you do that for your partner, and when does that, what's the boundary, what's the line there in terms
Mm.
of facilitating that?
And
Yeah.
how have you found that line?
I don't know. I think we're working through that. I think that's where it's been a bit challenging for me, because if for example, like a Facebook profile, if you were to go into a new relationship, you wouldn't delete the pictures of your ex, but you wouldn't necessarily have them visible, where he had a background picture of the four of them up until very, very recently. And it's difficult because I want him to go on that journey by himself. I want him to take actions and steps when he's ready. I don't want him to do it for me. But that one I did have to raise with him. I did speak to him in just a sense of just letting him know how I felt about that. And he just said, "Oh, I'll do something. I'll take it down." I said, "No, no, no. I don't want you to do that. I don't. You need to do things like that when you're ready. But I want to be open with you about how these things feel for me, and this is how I felt."
Yeah, and that's so important because, you're obviously so empathetic to how he's feeling and how the boys are feeling, and almost always, like a lot of women, putting everybody else's needs in front of yours. And
Mm.
and you matter in this scenario as well.
Yeah, that's something that took a long while for me to realize that. And I very much was the ball was always in his court. It was always kind of as and when he could, at the early days, get someone to look after the boys, and then it was, everything fits around with the boys and their activities. So I was almost like in limbo land all the time. And it would be
Mm,
like 2 days before, and it'd be like, we can do this. I'd be like, oh great. So I would like purposely keep my calendar free to fix around him, which was starting to have a bit of impact on, my independence, and exactly as you said, like what's important to me and what I want just
yeah.
wasn't really part of it in the early days. And it's only now we're starting, I still feel like I'm starting to sort of get a bit more balance with that now.
So how has it been meeting his family and the boys' grandparents?
Yeah, it was, so interesting enough, the first FaceTime we did over Christmas when we just literally met on this app, he was in lockdown with his sister and her husband, and we had the FaceTime all together. But the scary one was the parents. I just thought, "Oh, I'm just not gonna be able to do this." It just felt like so much pressure because we'd known each other a year pretty much, or near enough. And, I was like, falling in love with this guy. Going into the lounge and seeing pictures of their wedding picture and, pictures of her, it was a
Mm.
bit like, whoa, okay. I felt a bit like impostery type thing.
And it must be so hard for them because I guess, whilst they're obviously mourning the loss of their daughter-in-law, they want their son to go on and find love again, and they want their grandchildren to, have a female in their life. So I can imagine they're kind of sitting there going, well, do we take the pictures down? What do we do? We don't want the kids to think, that we've forgotten about their mum, but we don't want Beth to feel awkward. So it's probably a whole lot of conversations going on their side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've spoke about this. I've had quite a few conversations with his mum, and I just said, "Oh, I was so nervous when I met you," blah blah. And she's like, "Well, we were nervous as well." And we kind of
Mm.
had that real heart to heart, and it was nice to see that, the human side from them as well. Though I saw that very quickly because they're just really lovely people.
Do you ever feel like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it the way that their mum would have done it? Or are you quite confident carving out your own role in their life?
It's a good question. I think in the early days, because I was very aware that they were grieving as well. My partner was having some troubles with the eldest sleeping, and he'd wake up crying for mummy, and I just really wanted to be there for my partner in terms of support, because it was lovely that he was confiding in me. So I did a lot of swatting and reading on child grievance, and just to kind of get a bit more confidence, and to sort of seek out some networks. Obviously come across your podcast, which my partner actually introduced me to, and a
Oh,
few
good
few
man.
other, yeah, which was amazing, like so helpful just to feel a bit more normal. But yeah, in terms of raising and being involved in that kind of stuff, I think I've definitely done my own thing. I think advice to anyone is, in order to maintain a sustainable relationship and for them really to trust you, you've got to be your authentic self. You can't
Mm.
go in there like trying to be this fun not that I am fun, by the way, but like you can't pretend to be
I
something you're
am
not.
fun.
I try and tell that myself every day. So you have to be your authentic self, but there are moments where I do think, you know, what would she think? And actually, do you know what, the pictures are the reminders of that. And sometimes I just catch myself kind of looking at them and thinking like, God, would she be okay with this? Like, is that the right thing to say? So sometimes it does impact me.
Yeah. And, I think most women, I mean, I've certainly had the conversation with my partner. If something were to happen to me, I would want him to find love again and I would want my children to be loved. So
Mm.
I think that's probably all that any biological mother would ask for. You spoke a little bit before about some of the guilt that you'd felt around you being with the boys and not their mum.
Yeah, it's something that catches me off guard every now and then. I think like we went to the oldest hockey match, and he's doing so well given he's just started, and it was just so amazing to be there and be that support for him. But then there's times where I think, oh, she carried him, she raised him into this alongside my partner, this remarkable young man, and you do get this like pangs of guilt that she did all the hard bit and I'm like getting the fun bit. And actually, it was funny. Got quite emotional on her birthday. Actually, just felt really sad for
Mm,
her, I think.
mm. Yeah, and I guess the closer you get to the boys, almost the closer you get to her because she's somebody in their life.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, they do talk about her a lot. It's something that's very much always going to be there, always something we need to talk about. And you think everything's going fine, and then he'll have perhaps a sleepless night and it will be crying for mummy or something like that. And then you feel like, okay, yeah, this isn't something that's gonna go away. This is like something that's gonna come up for the
Yeah,
rest of
and
his life, potentially.
I mean that's a lot for somebody to take on.
Yeah, it is, and but it doesn't feel it. I know that sounds strange. It
Well, I
just
mean, I guess so many all relationships have complexities, don't they? And when you're in this situation, I guess everybody is supporting your relationship. Whereas
Yeah.
sometimes when you've got an ex-wife on the scene and, ex-in-laws on the scene and children going back and forth and hearing all sorts of things, like a lot of the stories that we hear on the show,
Yeah.
perhaps in your situation, because everybody wants it to work, you've really got that going for you.
Yeah, and we have, and also my partner's incredible. He's been so supportive and so, like, I don't want to, is grateful the right word? I don't know. But, he'll send me like a bunch of flowers with like the sweetest cards that just say, so lucky to have you in our lives and just things like that. But
Mm.
just make it feel like he's not taking this for granted. He appreciates and understands what I'm doing and what I'm having to, almost sacrifice, I suppose,
Yeah.
and what it does involve with me. So I don't feel like I have to feel it or say it because he's already there.
Obviously there's this part of the children's lives and your partner's lives, which part of that will always live on through the boys and in the ways that you talk about keeping the memories alive. But you have a future as well, so what are your hopes for the future for you and your partner and the boys?
Yeah, it's something I've been rubbish at ever thinking about for myself. And we speak about the future a lot. I mean, obviously we're still very early days. And they've been through a lot, and obviously the boys will always come first, and their emotional stability will always be the priority. We've talked about having our own child, and I've been quite open that I would like to have a child with him. And I don't think it would add anything to us in the sense of my relationship with the boys. I think it would just be like almost like the icing on the cake. And I
Mm.
think where I worry if we weren't to consider that, there's always this niggle in the back of my mind that if anything was to happen to our relationship, I would lose a family overnight, and that's quite scary. But I think there's lots of hurdles for us to get through. I still feel like for not for me and my partner, but for the boys, I feel like we're still in this honeymoon period, and obviously we're pre-teens. So, I'm under no illusion there's going to be some challenges. And I feel like I just want to make sure that they're in a really good position and we're in a really good position before we start to complicate our lives even more than what it is right now.
Well, it sounds, I mean, life's so unpredictable, as you well know, but it sounds like you're in such a really strong place, and I think having the support of your partner and those people around you has obviously really helped you on your journey. I guess I'm interested to find out what advice you would give to somebody else who's thinking about dating a widower with kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really take your time to get to know each other as a relationship and really kind of set those strong foundations and make sure that I don't think there's a wrong or right time to introduce the children. We did wait quite a long time. I'm not saying that's what you need to do, but I think just make sure that this is something that has got legs, because with children who are grieving or who have had a loss, it's a lot more damaging to them if they were to then lose again, rather than if you've still got your mother alive. So it's a bit different to kind of, I would say, typical step family. So really do take your time to make sure that you spend enough time getting to know each other. And also, once you have introduced the children, your lives change so dramatically. Enjoy it. Enjoy doing like your weekends and getting away and having fun. I think also don't overthink it. Try and go with the flow as much as you can. Again, goes back to my point of just being your authentic self when you do meet them. Don't try and be something you're not or something you think that they want, because that's not sustainable. And kids need consistency and they need trust, especially with what they've been through. So just really be yourself. Build your own support. I obviously had like your podcast, I'd done reading, I got a coach for other reasons, but ended up really helping me. Making sure that although you will naturally want to put them first because you want to see them and building those relationships will be your focus, make sure that you've got your own outlet, like whether it be a gym or something, because you don't want to bring any of the wobbles that you might have to that home environment with the kids there. Like, make sure you release that somewhere else, or you've got someone you can talk to, and it's not just your partner all the time, because they've got their own things going on at the moment, so you need your own support network. I think key is to be open and transparent with your partner, from the start. If something's upset you, or made you have a wobble, like, speak to them about it as and when it occurs. Don't let it fester, because it can quickly spiral out of control. And I wasn't very good at that at the start. And I'd kind of bottle things for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden it comes out, and he'd sort of look at me and go, why didn't we talk about this at the time? Because I was feeling this, or, I thought we were thinking that. So really try and trust in that relationship, because if you can trust in that relationship, then that's going to be a successful relationship anyway. And if you can't, then there's other questions you've got to ask yourself, of what's going on there. Just be patient. If it's going to be a great relationship and it's going to work out, then don't rush it. Just really let it happen when it's right. And goes back to my point earlier, allow yourself to ask for what you want. Absolutely get all consumed with them and their routine and their wants and needs at the start, but make sure that you do take control back on some of that stuff and really allow yourself to ask for what you want and share your wishes for the future. Because if you don't, all that will do is build up in resentment and just damage your relationship anyway. So take the plunge and be bold and brave, and ask for what you want, because there's 2 of you in this relationship. 4 of us, actually.
It's so much good advice there, and I think for kind of any woman going into any relationship, a lot of good advice. We tend to not be very good at prioritizing our own needs. So Beth, I absolutely loved talking with you today. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. I know there'll be a lot of women listening who will have taken something from the conversation, and it's just such a privilege to be trusted with your story. So thank you.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure, and it was great to talk about it, to be honest. Like therapy, isn't it?
I won't bill you. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. A massive thanks to Beth for sharing her story, and a huge thank you to you all who've been in touch with me. It's meant the absolute world to get all your messages and hear how the podcast has helped you. If you've got a story you'd like to share on Stepmum Space, then please do get in touch. You can find me on all the socials at Stepmum Space or at stepmumspace.com. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do spread the word, rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening.